or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, welcome. It's morning here in California, so welcome, welcome. Or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, welcome. It's morning here in California. That is my echo because I just went live on YouTube in case people have trouble finding this. So, okay, and welcome, welcome. I am so excited about today's webinar. We are going to be talking about how much theory and evidence do you really need to be a competent clinician? And this is such a challenging issue, I think, in the 21st century. And I really don't think we talk enough about how stressful this work can be because we almost have too much good stuff. We have so many amazing theories. We have so much amazing research. I mean, compared to when I entered the field 30 years ago, there is a lot of good stuff out there. However, what I am discovering as I listen to professionals, new professionals, even seasoned professionals around the world is that there is just a little too much information out there for all of us to juggle. And it really has become burdensome. It's too much in some ways of a good thing. And it's a very real struggle. But when you take all of this amazing theory and research and the advances in our field and neurobiology and all we understand about the brain, I mean, it's awesome. But yeah, for the individual practicing clinician, sitting in a room, 20, 30, please, I hope you're not doing more than 30 hours per week. I even think that's too much. But when you're doing this hour after hour after hour with all of these clients with multiple problems, it's a little too much. And so, my real passion right now, my focus in life, my focus, in terms of where I'm putting my energy professionally is really in trying to find ways to take all of this amazing information and research and to distill it down to make it usable for the practicing clinician who is sitting there hour after hour listening to just extraordinary forms of human suffering that we are going through in the 21st century. There is just so much going on. People are struggling with so much, and yet it is very stressful to be able to pull all this together in a nice, neat little package to help them. So that is what we are going to explore in today's webinar. So I have my assistant, Alina, who is going to be collecting questions and comments in the chat box. So go ahead and drop those in as we go along. And I will try to get through this in like 30, 40, probably 45 minutes. I tend to talk too much, minutes so that we can chat at the end. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Alina, unless there's anything else you think I need to know before I go forward. We're good?
No, go ahead.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, hopefully people have had a chance to get connected. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about theory and research in the past, theory and research present, and theory and research going forward. We are going to talk about some practical implications, and then I am going to invite you to what I see as an alternative, hopefully a better future for those of us doing this much needed work. And as we are in, this is being recorded in like month 20 of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a lot of human suffering that we will be dealing with, I think, for many, many years to come. The psychological, the family, the loss that we have internationally is just tremendous. So I really know that we will be doing some very, very difficult work, as mental health professionals in the field going forward. And so I'm hoping to offer you an alternative. So let's get started. Okay. So let's look at years past. In the beginning was Freud. And it's kind of interesting when you think about where the whole field of mental health, psychotherapy really got started, because Freud was actually a neurologist, which totally makes sense, right? In 19th century Vienna, which is actually where my dad is from, which is quite interesting. And I have gone to Freud's favorite little coffee house in Vienna. Good place, but I have another favorite. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Okay. And so he began studying hypnosis as a neurologist. And that's kind of where he shifted from being more of a physician to doing this hypnosis thing. But after kind of playing with hypnosis, he actually dropped that and started focusing on what he called the talking cure. And of course, we all know he developed what is called psychoanalysis in the field of mental health, of talking to someone to alleviate mental and emotional and actually physical. Back in Freud's day, they did a lot more of that. And it's strange, give us 150 years, and we're back to a lot of that with some of our brain-based interventions that we'll talk about today. So we kind of come full circle. But this idea that you could talk to somebody and help alleviate mental and emotional and physical suffering did begin with Freud in the late 1900s, excuse me. So that's really where we began. And of course, we began with one theory. Then in the early years of our profession, I guess the first century, you could say, that's how old we've gotten. And I actually was part of that century, which was really bizarre putting the slide together for me. But all of the theoretical orientations were very rigidly divided. Like in Freud's circle, if you stop following him, you were excommunicated. You were literally not invited to his coffee house talks and to his dinner parties where he did all of this. You were just excommunicated almost from the psychoanalytic community if you didn't do what Freud said, right? And so Jung got kicked out, Adler got kicked out. They created their own schools, but very rigid, very not respectful of each other, and very disparaging of anyone who thought differently. And quite honestly, that attitude continued for decades. And you can still see it alive and well in many of your colleagues, which I don't think is the healthiest attitude for us to have towards each other. So then came the behavioralists, right? And in the beginning, just so you know, the behavioralists and the cognitive folks, they didn't even go to the same dinner parties and coffee houses, right? Eventually, that did become cognitive behavioral, but the behavioralists and the cognitive folks came in with bringing in the scientific method to psychotherapy and the talking cure. And again, this was so different than any of the other schools. No one talked. Everyone was, competed. Everyone was disrespectful. And if you're in one camp, you couldn't have anything to do with the other camp. And then in all this, of course, Carl Rogers comes along with humanistic, and then Fritz Perls gets in, and their two approaches look very, very different camps, even though they're both humanistic, right? And then we have in the 50s and 60s, 70s, family therapy came onto the scene. And again, they were totally different than everyone else. They didn't go to the same parties, started their own conferences. And then even within family therapy, you have the systemic and the structural and the Bowen and Satir, and everyone was different and everyone belonged to a single camp, even though they were all systemic, and no one wanted to talk to each other or go to each other's parties, coffee houses, and dinner parties. And so, that's really, all the way through the end of the 20th century. I can't believe it, because I was born during the 20th century. My kids always say, "Mom, were you alive in the 1980s?" I was like, "Yeah, I was alive in the 1980s." So, but all the way through the 20th century, and definitely you still see this, a fair amount of this today, and you probably really saw it in your grad program. Even if you're in one right now, you're probably seeing it live and played out in front of you. But this strong, strong divide, and you're in a camp and the other camps are bad. And it's this very us versus them mentality. And even when you see the postmodernists coming onto the scene in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the solution focused narrative, collaborative, again, there is this I'm different than you type of mentality, which is how the whole field has really been. And so that's the first century or so of the profession. And then what's also happening during this time, at least till the end of the 20th century, is that there's been very little research that's truly clinically relevant. So I started my doctoral program in 1993. I finished it in 97. I know that number for sure. And during this time, I mean, we took classes on how to do research research. It was a doctoral program, but there was very little research out there that told me what to do in the room. Like that was just coming into being. All the evidence-based treatments we know now were still very much in their developing phases through the 80s. And we started seeing them coming out more in the 90s. And that's broad strokes. I know there's some exceptions, but in large measure, like they weren't taught in my grad program. I mean, seriously, narrative and a collaborative and were barely taught in my program in the mid 90s, right? And so the research certainly was much further behind that. It wasn't really till the 21st century where we really saw a shift. So let's talk about that in just a moment. So next, I want to just talk about how practicing clinicians use theory. So most folks adhered very closely to basically one school. I got trained in collaborative language systems. That's my approach. And that's really where my identity came from. My identity was very tied to that. I went to hundreds, if not thousands of hours of training in collaborative language systems. I mean, I got myself very well trained. And it's really because there were about just 8 to 10 theories floating around to even choose from. And even for licensure, you studied maybe 8 to 10 theories to get your license. Those of you who are in the pipeline right now to get your license, that probably sounds like heaven. At the time, we complained, just like everyone complains now. But the truth really is we studied 8 to 10 theories to take our licensing exams back then. And that's really what we kind of chose. We got to specialize. We felt, and you didn't hear anyone talk about imposter syndrome. Don't know if the term probably wasn't coined back then. But I think most people, because you trained in one approach, you really felt solid in what you were doing. And looking back and talking to folks today, I see what a luxury that really was, because it was so much simpler to do our work. The one thing, though, there was still a lot of tension between schools, a very, either or mentality. And I think the one thing looking back was there was this disrespect of other professionals. And I will be very honest here and say that early in my career, as I had identified to be a collaborative, language therapist, collaborative dialogic is what they call it today, therapist. I spent a time where you were either, collaborative or you're wrong. That's I spent maybe a year or two of my early career. I've grown out of that phase. And at a certain point, I realized, especially studying appreciative inquiry, that I need to have a better attitude and appreciate, what every approach brings to this very, very difficult work of helping people through life's most difficult personal challenges. So, but that was really the culture back then. And so kind of moving forward to today and what things look like in the 21st century, we now have over 500 different recognized psychotherapy theories in the field. That is a lot more than 8 to 10, is all I have to say. In terms of theories, now we have multiple types of theories. We have our traditional theories. We have the subtypes. When I try to write a chapter on CBT, holy moly, it's like there's CBT principles, but then the unique forms and packaging of CBT, goes well beyond, Ellis and Meichenbaum and, control theory and all that. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it's really intense. And then you have these EBTs, the evidence-based treatments that are manualized for specific populations. And so between all those, we have well over 500, which I am now going to say and argue is too many. to really be useful to the person in the room. Because how do you even decide which of those 500 you're going to choose? Like, it almost is like happenstance who your supervisor happens to be, what your agency has to be doing. There's hardly a way to even make an informed decision. It's hard to have informed consent when there are 500 theories, which is the one you really need to be using. Now, in terms of research, okay, that is, and so we got all these theories, right? So explosion there, but the research, I would say, has even exploded exponentially and in multiple directions, making us even more stressed out. And so I would begin by saying there is now enough research in mental health that there is an ethical mandate. The public, third-party payers, probably our licensing and ethics boards, there really is a mandate that you need to know, at least in broad strokes, the research that informs what you do in the room. And you need to be able to explain that to your clients. And so there is a certain level now of a research-informed ethical mandate. It's just like any of us who would go in to see a physician or a medical doctor. We expect them to be able to explain the science between whatever medication they give us, behind whatever treatment or surgery they recommend. I mean, we expect this of our medical professionals. Mental health professionals are a subset of medical professionals. And we now have the type of research that is, it's obviously not as well developed as in the medical world, but we have enough now where there's an ethical mandate that we can describe why we're doing what we're doing and how that relates to what the, professional research literature says about what we're doing. The research is so much more clinically relevant so that it can guide what we're actually doing in session. 30 years ago when I came to the field, we had a couple of broad strokes. And that was it, man. There wasn't much else about, if you do this, you're more likely to have that outcome. These are the predictors and factors that we know are associated with clients who are actually able to make clinical improvements. We have a lot more of that now. Obviously, we need more and more in the years ahead. We could use a lot more in the work in this area, but it's happening. It's there. It's building. We are also in a situation where today, there are certain approaches that unquestionably are better for certain types of issues or certain types of clients. So there are certain things that the research is so clear that we need to be able to do. And the one that is most, there are a couple. I mean, you look at the treatment for autism, right? I mean, that has become its own subspecialty because the research is so clear in that area. And if you were one of my beloved postmodern colleagues who, thinks that diagnosis is a disaster, which it can be, but it's a double-edged sword. The reason we're able to help so many more, kids and families with autism is because there was research around that diagnosis and we needed that darn manual to make that diagnosis. And also with OCD, the research is very clear, that anything that's like cognitive, talking about it, is not as effective as the behavioral stuff, because most people who suffer with or experience OCD, they logically know what they're doing isn't rational, but they can't stop themselves. And that's why the talking about it doesn't help the vast majority of them. So can there be exceptions to all of this? Of course there are exceptions, right? Definitely there can be some people who are helped to a certain degree with talk therapy around OCD, but as a licensed professional, we still need to know what the research says so we can help our clients work together with us to make collaborative, informed treatment plans based on what we know. And so we also, though, with the research, it is very hard and very difficult for full-time practicing clinicians who now have caseloads of 25, 30. Please, God, I hope you don't have more than that. It's impossible for them to take the time to keep up with the literature, because how do you get access to cutting edge research? Well, you either are reading journal articles that you have to have, I have sent to my house. You can have them sent to your email inbox. So that takes time, or you are jumping onto a search engine like PsycInfo that you have to pay for. It costs a lot of money, and to do a search and download and find the information. It is not user-friendly. It's not rational or reasonable to expect practicing everyday clinicians to access that on a regular basis. The other thing we have now in our field, where I didn't even have a class on this in, the mid 90s, was on neurobiology, especially around the neurobiology of trauma. Our understanding of trauma and how it affects clients has changed everything. It really has changed so much of what we do. And then we have these what I call brain-based treatments. I don't know if anyone else calls them that. I don't know what else to call it, but it's EMDR, brain spotting, mindfulness, neurofeedback, EFT tapping, all these things. And by the way, when EFT tapping came out, I'm like, well, that sounds kind of crazy. And I was talking to one of my students, like, Diane, it changed my life. And so of course, I have access to psych info, right? I'm a professor, put it in. I'm like, holy moly, it's a recognized, evidence-based treatment. I guess I got to, understand that and put that into, at least what I can refer to, so we now have this whole other set of interventions that are highly specialized. You need to get special training, but it's understanding how the brain is, how the brain works. And of course, you've always had the medication, psychopharmacology, which again is a whole other area we need to understand. But this brain-based treatment really is a game changer too, because it's kind of working on the brain the way the medications are. And how do we know how to refer clients to one versus the other? I mean, do you need to get trained in one of these? This is a whole other thing we need to add to our tool belt, right? And then the other thing I will add to all of this in today's world is now we have medicine, the field of medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine is being able to identify much more subtle things that affect mental health in terms of anxiety, depression, even schizophrenia, ADHD. It is mind-boggling what we're learning, how, like there are over 20 different processes that actually affect the mind that we know of, right? From gut health to, vitamin deficiencies to liver functioning. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can affect the mind that is physiological. And so this is just so many different new developing areas of knowledge that the everyday practitioner can really benefit from, but how do you access it? I mean, that's really the challenge. Now, in terms of how we use theory in the 21st century, one thing I don't think too many people say out loud, but I'm going to say it out loud today, and I don't think I've ever said it this clearly before. So what's weird is in grad school, right? Most of you were asked, and I still ask all of my students to write a theory of choice paper, right? What theory do you want to use? Let's write a paper on that. And we kind of give you, I think, the idea or the illusion, you could argue, that you get to choose your theory, right? And then you go to the field. And then virtually all of my students in LA, are either required to use a certain evidence-based treatment, or they're significantly limited because, let's face it, there is no supervisor on the planet who knows the 500 different theories out there. So you're basically limited to, which of those 500 theories, usually 2 or 3, that your supervisor is competent in, right? So you're kind of telling you have this theory of choice, but until you hit licensure and go get yourself trained in it, you're really limited to what your agency is doing and what your supervisor is doing. So it's very limited now in terms of what individual clinicians can do. Because back in the good old days when I was in grad school, you really could, your supervisor only had to know 8 to 10 theories. You could go in and say, I'm learning this theory. Most of the time the supervisor would work with you on that. But that can't happen today with 500 theories and all of the mandates from third-party payers. So, and then when you're looking at what's going on in private practice, most people are using more than one theory. The people I know who have full-time private practices are typically using more than one theory. Many of them will often describe themselves as more eclectic, but the problem with being eclectic is it's really kind of a wing it approach. When someone comes in, you are kind of using what you think is going to be the best fit for them. And the question is, how much of that research and knowledge base is going into that decision? And I think it varies very much across clinicians. For licensure, and I know many of you listening are probably in this boat, you're trying to learn 20, 25 different theories to sit for your licensing exam. even though in practice, you're probably just using 1 to 3. So it creates a very, very stressful process when people are going through the license exam process. In terms of, it's as one of my students have described it, it's like going back to grad school, but all by yourself. And it's a very stressful process. It is a lot to learn. And it takes up, I think, a disproportionate amount, actually, given how much, that maybe 25 to 50% of the exam is actually on these theories, depending which exam you take and just what happens to be on your particular exam. So much time is put into reviewing all these. And I think the question is really open. Is that really beneficial to clients and the profession? And I don't have an answer per se, but I think it's an important question. And actually, I'm going to be working on some research projects. We're connected with research projects, hopefully, that will look at this. So also in the 21st century, we have the common factors research that has come out. And the most commonly cited, so common factors research is basically research that's looking about, what are the common factors across all theories that seem to predict change? And so when common factors researchers started looking at, what actually predicts positive client outcomes, that clients are actually making clinical gains, many of them found, and there are multiple schools of common factors researchers. Lambert's is probably the most well cited. And this is approximations, but it's been variations of this are much more similar than different. About 40% are client factors, how severe their problem is, how many resources they have, how motivated they are, but who the client is and what they bring to the process. About 30% they find of outcome can be predicted by the quality of the therapeutic relationship. And this, if you look at all the different streams of research, this comes up over and over and over again. And that quality of that connection, does the client believe this is the right person to help them? Do they feel understood? That is huge. And it really does take more than empathy that you probably learned in your first semester practicum course. It is a very intricate skill set. And I really think we could do a much better job in this profession in terms of cultivating and developing that. It's almost like, as a member of the training, faculty and all of this, who creates a curriculum. I can tell you what we do is we throw it into that. We have a full year course, which is very unusual. Most, where I teach at CSUN, most universities have a 1 semester course on this, but we kind of put it into that first year and we never go back and touch it on it again. We really don't in any meaningful way, unless a supervisor happens to be talking about that. But when you look at this is the thing we have the most control over, and we are underdeveloped in this area in the field. I think another very fascinating piece of research here is 15% of outcome, it can be attributed to what they call the placebo or expectancy effect. And that is, how much does this client believe that you, their clinician, can help them with their particular problem? If they rate that highly, they are, that accounts for 15% of the outcome variable. This is huge. This is huge. And this is really an extension of the therapeutic relationship. I really think those two are correlated, right? Because that is 45% of the issue, because they have to trust you. They have to believe in you. They have to think you are competent. They have to feel like you get them and you get their problem and you know how to help them with that. That is so huge. And I think we could definitely do a better job working with that. I know the placebo effect has a really bad rep in the medical field because, every medication on the planet has to be tested against a placebo to, get things like federal approval and to prove its efficacy. But I want you to think about that, guys. The entire field of clinical trials for all of modern medicine, the one thing, the hoop you have to jump through is to fight against the client's mind. And if the mind believes that you're helping them, that is the number one thing that we have to rule out to see whether or not the medication is effective. The power of the mind is so unmined that is MINED, is we have not tapped into the power of the mind, but it is absolutely astounding how we have built all medical clinical trials because the mind is so powerful. If it believes the medication is helping, if it believes a sugar pill is helping one of any of the medical issues we have on this planet, the mind is so powerful that it can create changes. It's often just as good as medication. Again, another area of research that is huge. And then the last 15% is our specific theories. So our theories do make a difference. Our approaches make a difference. But when you compare it to the client, what they bring, the therapeutic relationship, what hope and expectancy bring, it is shockingly small compared to once you get through that first year in grad school. Pretty much all we talk about is theory after that, isn't it? So it's like, wow. And there are some studies that estimate only 5% of outcome is, attributable to the specific theory. And when you think of how much time and money we put in once we get through that first year of grad school to create a therapeutic relation, or first semester for many of us, right? That's all I had was one semester, first semester where I worked on those skills. After that, all we do is talk about theory. But a lot of research says that's really not what's making the difference. So now the Dodo bird verdict that they talk about in common factors research is that, theory really doesn't matter. Look how small it is. Look at the other factors, blah, blah, blah. But that's not quite an accurate interpretation of the common factors, because the concept is that the theories that we're using are how the common factors get delivered. It's how the relationship gets built. It's how we build hope and expectancy. Our interventions do matter. So, but what's interesting is it's very hard sometimes to separate out those common factors from specific factors. So, see, I skipped a clock. Had to move my little Zoom bar here. Yeah, and I think the downside, so common factors is kind of exciting. It really offers a lot of new ideas of how to think about things, but we've had few kind of in session or practical, like what I want to think of on the ground. What is the practicing clinician going to do about this, except for like feel a little better, probably, and less confused and a little validated. But what does it change about what they're doing in session? And I know there are folks working on this right now. It's exciting work, but I think the practical implications of common factors, we have not started to really see the in session, in the room, on the ground implications of that. So there's also another stream of research, which is, I think, quite fascinating, which is that some clinicians just seem to be better than others from day one. That the therapist effects are significant, and we don't talk about this enough. There is research that suggests that 15 to 20% of clinicians consistently get better results over the course of their career from beginning to end, regardless of what theory. They actually have them do different theoretical models and test them against different people. And some people are just better than others. It doesn't matter what theory they use. So that's really another angle to look at all of this. And what they found in this stream of research is, again, what they call therapeutic alliance or therapeutic presence. It's really the connection was the number one factor that was going on here. These clinicians were able to connect in a way that others don't. They also have just basic interpersonal skills. Again, here, therapeutic relationship is like the key. They're able to actually, say things, do things in session to connect better. They actually, which is a very interesting one, they had a lot of professional self-doubt. They had a lot of humility. They wondered whether or not they were doing a good job, were helping their client. And it's funny, I have so many people write to me about imposter syndrome and how they're suffering with that. And if you're one of those folks, I'm happy to share with you, there is research that shows that, am I doing enough? Am I good enough? Actually is correlated with being highly efficient, because you are questioning, you are growing, you're always seeking to improve yourself, which is the last piece, deliberate practice. Like you are consciously trying things, checking out to see if it works, adjusting course if it doesn't, and you're constantly consciously working on getting better, practicing your skills. And really consciously developing yourself over the course of your career. And these are the therapists who consistently seem to do better than others. So if this is the case, then why in the world do educators like me and the entire kind of mental health training field, why don't we do more around developing self of the clinician and who the person is as a human being, so that they can show up more authentically, more genuinely, to connect in this way where they become consistently better. Now, I can tell you as an educator in the United States why we don't do more of this in my program. So in CSUN, we do a quote unquote a lot. Our students have 9 months in a small group where they're learning clinical skills and doing some self-therapist work. And all of our students are required to do 20 hours of personal psychotherapy with a therapist outside the university over the 2.5 years that they're in our program, which is actually, I think, more than most, right? The reason is, though, I can tell you why we don't do more is because our university doesn't support us in the United States. The idea is this is an academic program. And even though California state law says we're supposed to be developing, the person of the clinician, the university doesn't support us if students don't want to do it. And there are some students who don't want to do this work. So our hands get tied legally because we are not supposed to delve into people's personal issues or students' personal issues. So this piece, because of just I really blame it on the legal system and the educational system and how we have defined, educating people. And it's really to create a safer, more equitable training environment. We can't get into personal stuff. We can't force people to do it. So it really ties our hands in a lot of ways because this is difficult work. Not everyone wants to do it. And it's supposed to just be a graduate program. So this is where this gets underdeveloped, I think, in a lot of graduate programs. And then in most clinical training environments nowadays, everyone's got such crazy caseloads. The clinicians have such crazy caseloads. The supervisors have such crazy caseloads. You don't have time for this type of work anymore. In contemporary, I'm in Los Angeles, so maybe in other areas of the world or other areas of the United States you do. But I can tell you in LA with what our clinicians and supervisors are doing, there isn't time for this. I think my average student, when they graduate, they're working 50 hours a week and dealing with crazy difficult clients with crazy amounts of clinical paperwork. There's no time to take care of themselves and really develop in this way. But I'd still, nonetheless, all those excuses aside, we don't talk about it enough and we don't do enough, I think, as a profession to support professionals in this way. So kind of summarizing up the planet, the present, we have too many theories in general, over 500, 20 to 25 for licensure. And we're in this weird place where you don't have a lot of freedom to choose because of just what the practice environment is, and because there are so many, and because there's no way your supervisor knows all 500 of those. We have a ton of research, which is awesome, but it is so fragmented. It is so hard. I'm an academic and I write textbooks and I get paid to collect all of this, and it is a full-time job. And so, someone who's working full-time in practice, there's no way to do it. And there's EBTs, there's the brain-based stuff, there's evidence-informed, there's common factors. And most average clinicians, unless you belong to an alumni group that gives you access to the to psych info and research databases, or you belong to a professional organization that gives you access, I'm sorry to, Google really can't give you the type of scientific evidence you need to really be solid in being a research informed clinician. You do need to read the journal articles and go to original resources to really do that. That's what makes a professional different than an amateur, is that we use the recognized, evidence base of our field. But the average person can't do that. I know people who want to, write books and stuff. And I say, well, you need to go do this and that. And they're like, I don't have access to any of that outside of grad school. So that is certainly something I would love to see all of. I know there are some professional organizations. I would love to see all of them give access to everyone in psych info, because we are an evidence-based profession. And so then finally, today, when you look at the average clinician, there is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of imposter syndrome around practicing in this environment. And many people I know feel very pressured to quickly learn a whole bunch of EBTs and brain-based stuff, and then my theory of choice, and they're trying to get it all together. So it is, I think, a very heavy, stressful environment that we have created. And then to answer this question, how much theory and research do you really need? I'm going to give you a couple of different answers because there are multiple layers to answer this question. First of all, ideally, you would have one theory or approach to draw from that, is a both and plus and pulls everything together. Because when you are sitting in the room across from another human being, you have milliseconds to pull down and decide what you're going to say next, because you should be listening with all your brain power to what they're saying. It's literally milliseconds. Having complex things to draw upon, even having 4 or 5 different options ahead of you, it's a bit much in that moment when you're in the room talking to somebody. So having a very simple, streamlined one, ideally, I would say, like I said, I started in the 90s. I had one approach I was drawing from, and it is simpler. It is easier. It makes the work truly more enjoyable. On the flip side, though, you basically, on the flip side, though, you want to be able to draw from the entire knowledge base of all of our theories. I mean, if you're practicing post-pandemic without even, having no knowledge of existential crisis, what Viktor Frankl talked about in terms of existentialism, because the pandemic has triggered existential crisis, and hopefully most of us actually think you should be in existential crisis with climate change and the pandemic and, just relate, the division in our society and, looking at our history in terms of, race and marginalization across the globe, right? Doesn't matter what country you're in. There's so much going on. You should be in existential crisis. You should be able to draw upon some of that knowledge when you're in the moment talking to your client in that room. Also, ideally, you should be able to draw upon all of the research knowledge we have to support you and your clients. I mean, we need it all. This is hard work. We are trying to be able to meaningfully help any client who comes to us resolve any form of mental, emotional, or relational suffering. That is a tall order. And yes, any guidance I can get from research, any hacks or shortcuts, I'll take them. So we really need, though, to take all of this and put it into a much more streamlined package, more like what people for the first, 150, if you look at the 19th and 20th century mental health providers, we all had pretty much one theory we were drawing from, and it was easier back then, I promise you. So how do we take all the knowledge we've got now and put it into something that is simple and streamlined? So let's talk about the future. So I'm going to just talk about what I think the future can't or shouldn't be. One, we should not have 1,000 theories in 20 years from now. I don't think that's helping anyone. I actually think, and I'm a textbook author saying this, I'm an academic saying this, we need to stop teaching outdated theories and unused theories. They need to stop being on our licensing exams. We need to teach the history of the field as the history of the field, and then focus on methods that really work for people who are practicing in the room today. We need to be able to pull this research together. I don't think we have anything close to the type of mechanism we need to distill all the research in the field to make it usable to practitioners. And I really have come to believe we've got the researchers over here, we've got the on-ground practitioners over here, and we need someone and a method and a distribution system to translate all of those journal articles, which are awesome and amazing. We have some amazing researchers in this field. The work they're doing is incredible, but it is too much for the single individual practitioner who is doing 30-second, sessions a week with high crisis, problem clients and families. We need a translation between those two parties, and we do not have anything useful that is close to that yet. And we need to create something that is consistently distributing this type of information. It's funny. In the early phases of mindfulness research, there was a group of us who got together, and there was one person, and we actually paid a fee to them, and they were summarizing all of the mindfulness research that came out for the first decade of mindful research. And he distilled it, and we got a monthly report with all the citations. We paid a fee. It was beautiful. So when you're doing mindful research in the beginning, we had someone doing this. We need someone to do this on a massive scale. So someone out there, if you're listening, I really think there's a huge role to be played here. I don't think that's going to be my job. But when in the future, we should not have clinicians struggling through like this infinite range of theory, research, and the evidence base, better educated, but less confident. And I hope the future is not going to ignore the self of the clinician. In fact, really having very deliberate approaches to this, I think is key. If you look at the research, we need to get really good as relating as human beings, connecting with our clients in a real, genuine, meaningful way, bringing therapeutic presence and clinical skills to how we relate to the human being in front of us, and who we are, who we show up as. That self of clinician, I think, is key to that, and developing that is what I really hope we're going to see in the future. I do believe we need to take a cue from medicine. If you talk to medical doctors, they do not talk about theory or think about theory when they go in to do a surgery, right? It's a doing. We need practices that guide our doing, and we need to distill all the research and theory into a very streamlined, straightforward set of directions for what to do when you're in the room. The theory and research needs to become much more unified and practical. Because right now there are these huge gaps. Like I said, we got research and theoreticians over here. We got the person in the room over here. And we do not have a lot of efficient ways to get the information from one group of professionals over here to the group over here who's sitting in the room. They've got milliseconds. If you're going to be, relationally attuned, to your client, you have milliseconds to pull from your knowledge base and to keep that relationship going. And so we have to create much more simplistic methods for describing our work to guide people who are in the room. Again, theoreticians are not sitting there going through research abstracts and thinking about the theory of what they're doing when they go in to do their surgery. It's just not how they work. And because they have to be there in the moment. And we need to have much more unified practices that are just easier and simpler to learn, so that distill all the information. So I think of this process as the difference between synthesis and integration. So integration is when you're putting a bunch of different parts together, which really pretty much most of the EBTs kind of fall into that category. And I actually wish we would teach them more in that way, so that people felt like they weren't learning, an EBT wasn't like learning a new theory. It's like, oh, we're gonna take some of this theory, that theory, and this theory, put it together and deliver it this way, which is how someone who's been in the field longer, that's when because I learned these EBTs, one at a time after having a solid base, and I can just see, yeah, that's the recipe here, I got it. But synthesis is something different. Synthesis is this boiling down the concepts into a streamlined language, into a streamlined description of practices that's really focusing on what you're doing in the room. Now you can go back and read theory. And I think at a certain point, there has to be some theory has to be there and be understood to support the practices. But when you're in the room, you cannot be thinking about theory. You have milliseconds to be drawing on what works. So what do I think synthesis is going to look like in the future? I think it's going to look more like an overarching framework or method that organizes all the theories, allows new theoretical concepts to be integrated. It allows, and it pulls on all of the research at the same time, and allows you to draw from all of this in a very simple, straightforward, single process that you are using when you're sitting in the room trying to connect with this other person as a human being. And to do that, though, we really, like I've said multiple times, we need to work on supporting the self of the clinician, who our clinicians are, developing them as human beings to walk their own talk, to and to really be able to have the confidence, the presence, to show up in a genuine way where people are able to really connect with them in a deep, meaningful way that is correlated with positive outcomes. So in terms of what what synthesis is going to look like, it's not a theory. Theory explains things, right? Theory is giving you, and we need some of those explanations. We've got to have some of those explanations, but theory is there. But synthesis is going to be pulling it all together. And I really think in the future, there's going to be a lot less teaching from a book, a lot listening to other people talk in lectures, and really developing skills in real life. And I've been lucky enough to be able to use virtual reality, mixed reality simulations to train my students. And I'm telling you, it is tenfold better. It is infinitely better because we are learning together in a safe environment where you can practice and stumble the actual skills. We have to get out of this mindset where we sit and listen to people like we're doing right now, to listen to people talk, and then we're expected to translate that into an actual skill set. In medicine has already is transitioning over to simulation. Many physicians need to do multiple simulations before they can do a real surgery. It makes a lot of sense. Mental health is going to be moving in this direction as well. It is the only way to do this work well. So if you're excited about synthesis, one option is for you to do this work yourself. And so the way, the way to do this, I would say, is to learn many different theories well: modern theories, postmodern, systemic, traditional, evidence-based treatments, and to learn these. And as you learn each one, you begin to look for those commonalities rather than seeing the differences. And the way I did this, and I know everyone's mind works differently, is to look at, if you take the labels off and you watch the person in the room, what are they doing? Okay, let's track that. Like when, Michael White is looking for, unique outcomes, and, DeShazer is looking for exceptions. They're asking questions. And if you just watch the two of them in the room, I know they actually have published arguments on how they're different. They look a lot alike, and that's the truth. And you see this over and over again when you begin to take off the labels. The other thing is to read the research. The research is so rich. There is so much of it. It's a regular thing to constantly be keeping up with it, because it's infinite. There's no way to read it all like there was back in the day. And the third component is really developing yourself as a human being and being able to show up in the way, that way in the room. And, this has become kind of my life calling. And this is where I have arrived in my career in terms of my focus. Is teaching this framework that I accidentally kind of put together, because writing, I think I'm the only person who's ever written an entire, comprehensive traditional theory textbook, as well as family therapy. And I just had to layer all that knowledge and organize it in my head. And I ended up accidentally, in some ways, creating this framework. I don't know what to call it. I call it the Gehart method. I called it therapy that works. People didn't like that so much, so I switched over to Gehart method. I don't know, if you got a better name, let me know. But where I'm synthesizing the knowledge, the theory foundations, the research base, and really not even just mental health treatment. I really think another big chunk of the puzzle that we're missing as mental health is what psychology is telling us about motivation, wellness, and reaching our goals. I mean, how is it that we have to write these treatment plans and goals, right? We learn how to write goals. We don't learn the basic psychology on what it takes to achieve goals, what it takes to make basic small behavioral changes. It is shocking how little of that is in the mental health literature. So looking at the self of the clinician, who you are, how you show up, and I'm talking 360 degrees here: spiritual, emotional, relational, physical, financial, career, and even having a life, having adventure, having quality life experiences. All of that goes into who you are and how you show up in the room. And like I said, I do think the future of training is going to be virtual reality, simulated learning, where you're learning the actual skills. And this applies to those who've never been in a room with real client, as well as seasoned clinicians, learning to practice these ideas we're learning in real time in a safe experience. There's nothing quite like it. So I just want to share with you, if you are interested in learning how to synthesize the knowledge base the way I do, I invite you. Once or twice a year, I'm going to have the energy and time to teach one of these courses. I am launching one of my, Therapy That Works Gehart method courses. I will tell you the outcomes, research I did on the first cohort was truly, it blew me away. I don't know what else to say. 100% felt like they grew personally because I actually have them tackle some area of their life they want to see change in. 100% felt like they grew clinically, and I had new clinicians and I had seasoned clinicians. So I was worried about the seasoned clinicians feeling like I helped them, and I guess I did. That felt awesome. 100% felt more confident in their just, self as professionals. 100% felt like it was worth the investment of time and money in this course. So registration opens today. There are 45 hours of CE, which is the equivalent of a 3-unit course. There are lots of live sessions where you're going to practice. If you don't want to do that, you can do the recorded versions of it. Because you sat through this webinar to the end, you get $250 off. That is webinar $250. So you can check it all out at therapythatworksinstitute.com. If that's too hard for you, you can do dianegehart.com and go to my courses page. It'll take you there. So I'm excited about this. And like I said, you can do synthesis your own way. You can learn it from me. I don't really care. But I really think we could be doing so much better and so much more in this field. So I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. I'm going to ask Alina, if you've got a moment. I mean, if you can, you want to go ahead and...
Yeah. So there's lots of questions. There's also a question over on the YouTube live. And just lots of comments, just kind of agreeing with everything that you're saying, and people in the comments sharing their personal experiences. And even providing like some helpful resources, especially related to self of a therapist.
Awesome.
But one of the first questions that was asked, and I believe you probably answered this during the the presentation, was, like if we as therapists need to be an expert in all family theories, or if we can just select one and be an expert in that, and what theory would be the most applicable in various crises.
For family therapy? Was the question, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, wow, that's a difficult one. Because systemic gives us one piece, a very important piece of the puzzle, which is tracking that interaction cycle. And I still think that ability to track from homeostasis, rise of tension, symptom back to normal, however, that piece is huge. And I would say that piece is more important when you're working with couples. It cracks the code there. Working with families, I think the structural piece is huge. Hierarchy and boundaries in families. So those two pieces, I think, are huge. Intergenerational often adds an amazing perspective, and intergenerational is just taking both of these patterns, both the systemic and structural, and looking at them over generations. And that can be huge, especially when you're working with certain cultural groups where the family is much more intergenerational than it is nuclear. So you can't, so you need that piece. And then again, because you think of Satir and just her ability to connect and relate, I think Satir did that better than anyone. So I would say, those pieces are so huge. Also, solution focused and narrative and identity, especially when you're working with marginalized clients. That solution focused piece can be magic. It can just be magic working with families and couples to focus on what's working and do more of that. Often that is magic. But the narrative piece and how people's identities, how the family identities are being created, Here's, it is, I think it is not true for me to say that I don't use it all, but when I look at like how Satir connects and how collaborative therapy Harlan Anderson teaches, there is this honesty and this genuineness and this realness and this ability. So you kind of need it all. I mean, honest to God, that's kind of what we need to draw from it all, because everyone had a brilliant piece of information. My favorite example also is that Bojarmany Naj, right? He's that contextual therapist who was in a box and one of your, but he talked about this ledger of entitlement and indebtedness. And sometimes that's magic to be able to pull on that in a session. So, and then if you want to keep going on, EFT does this, pulls all this together really into a nice bundle to help you think through couples. Functional family pulls it all into a nice bundle to help with working with families. So there's so many layers. And so it's a matter of pulling it all together so that you can use it in the moment with your clients. So I don't know, Alina, I hope that answered their question.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So thanks so much. And so I can jump into the next questions if you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So another person asked regarding, because you mentioned earlier about newly graduated clinicians and how they go into agencies or residential programs and how the caseload expectations are so high. So one question was, why do you think agencies and residential programs expect such high numbers of caseloads?
It's just financial. I mean, it is just financially making all the parts work. There's not, a ton of money coming in to mental health, at least in the United States, probably more than most countries. I think I've seen some of those stats, and it is probably more than most countries. But it's still not enough to support clinicians. I work in LA, and when my students leave, they barely make a minimum wage. I'm having that conversation with them right now. It's a little depressing. That it's like, yeah, you still need a roommate. Someone else got to have a basic, 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in LA on the starting salaries with my clinicians. I'll say Alina's one of them, who is like working crazy numbers of hours. It costs a lot of money to just, keep getting trained. We need to learn these 500 theories or whatever, even 4 or 5 theories. It costs money to do it, but you're not getting paid a whole lot. And that's why the caseloads are so high, because there's just not enough money coming in to pay people fairly and reasonably for what they're doing. So it is it's a very unfortunate system in some ways. And I know some leaders in the field who actually felt like going to HMOs, paying for everything. Everyone's pay rate went so low, our caseloads went up, but more people are having access. So it is, and I think part of the problem, I'll be honest here, and part of the problem is we're not efficient enough. And yes, no one wants to do whatever 6 to 8 sessions. And that's what the HMO model fell apart when we tried to do that. But I also think if we can make ourselves more efficient, we can make more money. I will tell you, most of my clients see me once to twice a week. It is kind of rare. I never require, it's very rare that I recommend someone come in weekly. They almost have to be suicidal, but it's because I'm highly efficient and they make change. So part of the reason is we need to get better at making change happen faster, because that will increase, I think it would reduce the workload and hopefully increase, our pay. But that it is a very complex calculus. And, the truth is we do need to be supporting high quality mental health to everyone in society. It is, and I think coming out of this pandemic, it's going to be a crisis, because mental health is expensive and most people don't want to put a lot of money into it. And those people, including the government, right? They're funded in most countries. So yeah, and our workloads are going to go up coming out of the pandemic, I expect. Our cases are just more complex because everyone is traumatized. And we have a lot of people needing a lot of help, and there's not a lot of money to fund it. And that's why we are where we are. I don't know what else to say. It's all of those variables coming together, and hopefully going forward, we can find ways to make this work more accessible to more people, in a way that we get, clinicians get fairly paid to keep training up in these 500 theories and brain-based techniques and all this stuff. But it is a difficult situation, I think, for all the people needing treatment at a very reasonable rate, and the clinicians needing to get paid to be good. So there is definitely a moving kind of target and equation here. Next question.
Okay, so next question is that you say focus on more on the relationship with the clients, and I agree. I'm choosing my theory for my internship. I'm so confused. I learned Rogers person-centered, and I'm wondering what theory focuses on the heart of human connection.
Well, I'm going to give you my honest opinion. Lots of other people can do. Well, it's not my opinion. It's been my experience. How about that? And so I learned to connect that way through collaborative dialogic therapy. Thank you, Harleen Anderson and the crew at HDI. That was where I decided to go in. And I think of postmodern social constructionism it's humanism 2.0. So, and I really get upset when people are like, humanistic versus postmodern. I'm like, come on, guys. If Rogers were alive today and we had the idea of intersubjectivity, he did subjectivity. Okay. So intersubjectivity, which is postmodernism, is humanism 2.0. And we've created false dichotomies because you got to understand the basics of, humanistic subjectivity and how the individual is experiencing their reality before you can, what postmodernism is, what's going on in the therapist, subjectively, what's going on in the client subjectively, and what's going on intersubjectively between the two to create the reality that both are experiencing in the moment. So I think that's the cutting edge. Every single major theory, I almost fell off my chair when I finished revising my counseling theories text, where every single chapter had a postmodern evolution in traditional counseling, psychotherapy theories, including psychoanalytic, or psychodynamic. So we are evolving together, and I think we've created these false dichotomies. And if the one thing you get out of this lecture is, whenever you learn of anyone doing a new theory or any new idea or any research finding, I invite you to do what's called appreciative inquiry, which is, what can I appreciate about this? What nugget of wisdom about human suffering and how to alleviate it can I get from this theory, this research study, this person, to really appreciate all that we have? Because I'm telling you, I've been doing this work for 30 years. I use it all. I use it all. There's very little I have learned that I'm like, that'll never help any human being who comes to me for help. There's very little of that. But connecting well, I do think that postmodernists, at least they described it in a way that I really resonated with, and I was able to develop from that. I totally see, because from my postmodern situation, I can see that that's how I entered. That was the construction. I have met people from other theoretical walks, I think, who had good supervisors who were able to teach that to them. But that, for me, is what I have found to be the most humanizing approach. The social constructionist approach, particularly the collaborative approach, is kind of a little radical in that there's fewer guidelines, but it focuses entirely on making that connection. So I think that is, to me, that would be my recommendation, and it's totally from my experience. And I just want to put that out there too. Great question, though. Alina, what else we got?
Okay, so we have a handful of other ones. A couple of them are about the therapy that works. Mm-hmm. As well, kind of asking about if it's suitable for graduate students, if it only targets students who are about to graduate, how long the class is, and how many days or weeks it is, and if it will be offered again in the future. So I don't know if you wanted to quickly touch on those.
Sure. Yes. I mean, this has been fascinating for me to watch, because it's a framework. So we had people in the course who had never seen clients. We had people who were licensed professionals, with private practices. So it's really the whole spectrum can benefit from this approach, because it's a framework. And in grad school, it was like, oh my God, I can see how all these pieces fit together. It really made it all easy. People studying for licensure. And in fact, I'm going to probably do a special little licensure I don't know, bonus thing where it's like, oh, this is how all the things layer on top of each other. I get it now. I can see all the pieces. Now I can memorize those 20 to 25 theories a little bit easier because I can see the connections. And licensed people are like, oh, I learned this and that and the other, and now I can put them all together and use them simultaneously, again, in the moment, in the present with the client. So I think it definitely works for anyone on the entire professional spectrum. And the honest to God truth, it is so methodical, I don't know, simple, straightforward, that you probably don't even need to be in a master's program. As I look at this, it's someone who is a paraprofessional, could also go through the program and learn an incredible amount on how to help people, perhaps as a, case manager or something like that, because it's that straightforward. So in terms of the structure of the course, registration is opening today. It'll go through next Monday. I believe that's the 27th. And it is structured as a 12-week course. But you can take it over 12 weeks or 2 years. You have full 2 years to go through it. There are lots of live components. We'll be doing live simulations with mixed reality, the latest, really cool technology. There will be actual breakout sessions where we practice together. There'll be Q&As, but you can attend those or you can watch those. Some people choose to watch them all. Some people, you can come to more than one. You can get, because everything is offered more than once. So there are lots of different times to choose from. So you can go through it any way that works for you. And I do realize that different people learn differently. Life can happen. Some people really feel like they need that live experience, and other people actually prefer to just sit back and watch, and then at which point they're like, I'll watch it on my own time. So different people learn differently, and that's part of what we learn in this course is how to work with all of that. So that is how often is the course offered. It's offered it takes me a lot of time and energy, so I can only do it maybe once, maybe twice a year. It is not offered that often. It just kind of depends how my time and energy is. So that's kind of the answer to that question. Did I miss anything, Alina?
No, I think you got all of those questions that were about the course and everything. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. So there are still a handful of other questions, Dan. And so did you want to continue?
Yeah, let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So there are a couple of other questions related to theories again. And one of them is asking, when you were talking about certain theories being outdated, and, if you could clarify the difference between the terms theory and model/therapy model, and how do we know which theories are outdated?
Well, which theories are outdated depends on who you speak to, is what I would say. Like there's a part of me who's kind of still surprised that there are some people who still do psychoanalytic a la Freud out there. Even though I think many of us would say that is outdated, there are still people who use it. Okay. So, a theory is just bigger than a model. A theory is more developed on, there's a theory on how, a theory of health. Sometimes they call, some of them have theories of personality, how the personality gets developed. Theories of health is how I like to call it. It's more developed. A model will have more doing. There's usually some theory in it. So some people will call the evidence-based treatments more like treatment models than theories. We can argue to the academics can argue about anything, us. So which ones are outdated? That is answered from a matter of perspective. Okay, so if someone came into the field like me 30 years ago and learned an approach when lots of other people were learning, there were institutes teaching it, because a lot of these theories that are in my textbook, there are no institutes left teaching it. No one's teaching it anymore, but it's in the theory and it's in the textbook because it's on the licensing exam. It's crazy. So I would call those outdated. When there's no, in my Diane Gehart definition, when I'm writing a book, if I can't find several major institutes around the world teaching the theory, or at least several, United States, if it's US based, I get concerned on how up to date that theory is. And I see those as those who are kind of should be relegated to the history section of a textbook, which I think we need to be creating. But what happens is there are still people alive using them today, using them effectively, using them well, because they were trained in those. I spent thousands of hours training with Harleen Anderson to learn collaborative therapy, folks. So, and folks who got trained well in a theory, it's still contemporary, it still works, it's not outdated for them. Now, if you're brand new coming into the field, wanting to learn a particular type of theory, it may be outdated for you to go back and learn it. I hope that makes sense, because that is a very complex kind of question, but it's so when is a theory outdated? It depends when you enter the field and whether or not you can get trained in it well. I did see something in the chat about, is there a certificate? Yes, there is a certificate for therapy that works, the Gehart method. You get a nice, pretty wall certificate to put up there with all the other certificates you have from other things you do, if you're one of those many clinicians who collect certificates for your wall. So it is a certificate program.
Okay, thanks, Diane. It's another theories question about, is there any evidence that learning more than 400 or more theories makes for better therapy outcomes?
There is no such research study, because I don't think anyone can learn 450 theories. That is, you just can't put it in one person's head. And that's why, I've been saying this, I guess, for the past year. We can't keep continuing doing what we're doing. It's kind of nuts. And so when I write these theory textbooks, and I get feedback from, professors all over the world about what I should and shouldn't have in my book. And they all disagree. But it's like no one wants the old stuff that they learned to be taken out of the textbook. That is why it's why new professionals are being tortured with 40, 50 theories in grad school. And I'm part of that. But it's because, and this goes back to just how we make sense. So if you learn theory, I don't know, let's say doing Roger's way of doing theory, of doing that work, you want to teach the next generation the same way you learned. And Rogers absolutely needs to be taught. And a lot of great information needs to be honored for what he contributed in terms of humanizing this profession. However, the research is, that the core conditions are not enough. We do need more. And so what do you do with that? Right. And so how do we take, that humanizing, incredible presence, and how do we integrate that with the other parts that we now know with research? We now have new ways of constructing knowledge, understanding how a subjective reality interacts with another subjective reality through intersubjective reality. So, oh my God, Alina, I have actually forgotten the question. I was so interested in what I was saying. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. So they're wondering if there's any evidence that proves better outcomes, therapy outcomes for 400 plus theories.
No, and I don't know if there's ever been research done on this and how many theories a person can use at one time. I think we just throw up our hands and call it eclectic. It's really eclectic. It's not integrative unless you put it together systematically, like evidence-based treatments are usually integrative. Most people are just kind of eclectic and flying by the seat of their pants. And I do think you can do better than that. So no, there is no evidence that 450 theories helps anyone, to my knowledge. Of course, I can't read all the research either. Great.
Okay, so there was a couple more questions that came up about the course as well, about the cost of it, and then if it would be possible, like let's say if someone can't start the course like immediately within the next month, if they could start the course in the new year.
Okay, so the course is $2,597. I don't know when exactly I'll be, that has not been scheduled. It is so much work to get one of these going. I see how it goes, and then I will regroup and decide from there. But if you are interested in taking it in the next year, this is for sure your one opportunity I have to offer you. Because again, a lot of people start it, life happens, and so they finish it, later. You have 2 years to kind of work through all of the material. So it adds a ton of flexibility in terms of when you can, there are lots of different, so I have things for people all over the globe. You have 2 years to work through the content of the course too. So, and you have it all there for full 2 years to go back and replay and re-experience. Great.
Okay. There was one question that one of the attendees is asking. It's more kind of like your thoughts on a case that they have, and wondering if they should refer out their current client into to somewhere else. And
That's probably beyond the scope of this webinar. I don't want to get into giving
okay.
legal advice since unless it's a real generic thing, I don't want to give any specific advice.
Okay. All right, we'll hold on to that one. There are other questions coming up about the theories as well. If you have a course or guide that on the 2025 theories on the licensing exam.
Well, depends which licensing exam you're taking. Right now, I have a Laugh Your Way to Licensure course, and I have all that, listed in the course. In California, it is pretty clear. On the national exam, it's less clear in terms of what those theories are. This is for the MFT exam is what I'm talking about. That's kind of where my course is. So you can you can download those from the California site. But yeah, those 20 to 25 theories, I'm not going to get into that at the moment, but you're kind of marching through your family theory. You can march through my Mastering Competencies family therapy textbook, and then take a good look at my counseling theories textbook, at least a skim it. So the other theories would be in the counseling theory textbooks, but I have two textbooks, I have several textbooks. The two I recommend for license exam, both counseling and MFT, are Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy is the bulk of what you need for family therapy. And then there is the Theory and Treatment Planning and Counseling and Psychotherapy. California, you definitely need some of those. National, you need some of those, but to a lesser extent. Obviously, for the national counseling exam, you need the counseling theory textbook. Probably not too much out of the Mastering Competencies book. So I hope that's a quick tour of those 20 theories.
Okay, perfect. So someone's asking, how many theories should a clinician learn in order to have a sufficiently diverse toolbox?
Wow. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? That's kind of the mystery. My thought is, well, and there is no single answer to that. And that's why I think we need to move away from this whole theoretical thing. We need to move towards a streamlined, coherent, singular framework that you can pop all the theories you learn into this framework. Because some of the theories you're going to learn or methods you're going to learn, you don't have a choice. Your employer is going to make you learn those, and you can pop them into the same framework. That's what I'm trying to teach in this method of mine. How many do you need? And it's a function of how many, how broad that theory is, and how well you get trained in it. Because if you get really well trained in almost any single theory, that's going to make you generally a much better clinician. You probably need fewer other theories to fill that one out. So yeah, I think it's really a function of, because certain theories I think just have broader reach than others. Some are more narrow and serve a narrower number of client types, like how client, because one of the things you learn in my course is how clients, you really need to make sense of how your client makes sense of the world and make sense of what you're saying, how they make meaning, how they construct their world. So there's certain, you need to have enough tools so that you can actually relate to all your clients and deliver your relationship, your quote unquote interventions, you deliver to them something that they can actually absorb and use in their own personal life. So you do need to go beyond your comfort level, I think, because most clinicians are very psychologically minded. A lot of our clients are not. And so you need to have something that can bridge that divide is also, I think, very important. So I know it wasn't a simple, straightforward answer to your question, but you need enough theories or methods to really reach out to all the different ways that a client needs information delivered to them. And the more you learn an approach really, really well, I would say the less you need other approaches. And so I would invite you to consider that. And what is, when do you learn a theory well? I think something like this program I'm offering, it is like a major investment of time and energy to really dive deep. It's not a 6-hour workshop. 6-hour workshops are not going to get you to a deep understanding of being able to use a theory. You're looking at 40, 50, 60-hour programs that really teach you to do one approach really well. The more you do that, I think the fewer that you will need of other ones. I hope that's a sufficient answer to that question.
Okay, so there's a lot more questions coming in right now, Diane, and so
I'm gonna be taking them if you can help me collect all these, Alina. I'm
definitely. All right, so one of an anonymous attendee is asking if for the course, if there is like a type of scholarship that you may offer, or like any sort of financial plans for like payment methods or things like that.
Absolutely. So yes, I know it is expensive. And I know, like I said, most of us aren't making tons of money. I do believe everyone who took the course, I was terrified of this question. They said it was totally worth their investment. But there are 3 different ways to pay for the course. You can pay for it all at once, put it on some people, use their 0% credit card or their bonus point credit card, pay for it all at once. You can pay for it in 4 installments. Everyone can do that. You can also use PayPal credit that lets you pay as long as you want to, and there's 0% interest in the first 6 months to try to make this affordable for everyone who can. So there are lots of different ways to make it work for you financially. And like you can see from the first cohort who went through, I had to ask the question, was it worth your time and money? And I got a yes. So that was good. That was very reassuring for me to hear. So yes, so there are multiple ways. If you want to do this financially, I came up with 3 different ways to make it work. So hopefully one of those will resonate and work for you. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, if from your perspective, if you believe that object relations is one of those outdated theories.
Boy, this is my take on psychodynamic, and it's my honest take. I actually think psychodynamic has some really good stuff there, but it is so hard to access any of it. And it is like, all the contemporary attachment theories, like emotionally focused couples therapy, actually systems theories, the family systems work is a simpler way to understand what psychodynamic folks are talking about than the psychodynamic stuff. So is it outdated? If you learned object relations, you got trained that way. If you want to talk about expensive training, go get trained to be psychodynamic. That is the most expensive long road approach that you watch people take years and years. And I'm like, it's not that hard, folks. You can really do it a lot simpler. So object relations, there's a lot of great stuff there. Is it easy to access? No, it costs. You think a couple thousand is expensive? Holy God, like object relations is tens of thousands of dollars to do it well and many years. And so that's where I'm saying we can do this easier. God bless all the folks who did that early work. They were groundbreaking. They were amazing. They were incredible. And 100 years later, we're actually able to streamline that and make it much easier to access and to be phrased in ways that today's audiences can connect with. I've been teaching for 30 years. And what the books I assigned even 20 years ago, I cannot assign to my current students because the internet has changed how we read. No one wants to sit there with these dense, theoretical, heavy words, long sentence. No one can sit through that anymore. That's why I teach this way, because the way object relations works, the way it was taught, and it doesn't work or translate very well to the 21st century with all of us who are used to like getting our news and all information online, getting research articles, on our little handheld phones. And so you need to package that differently. And I always like to joke, you can tell, my psychodynamic section of my bookshelves, because all the books are like this thick, they're like 3 inches thick. Because they went on and on and on and on. And most people today don't have the patience, the bandwidth. They've not been educated, even K through 12, through college to read that sort of material. And because we don't talk that way anymore. I mean, that's the honest to God truth. We don't even students 20 years ago could wade through that before the internet and social media took over. And you've got tweets that are just whatever, 128 characters, whatever it is. I mean, that's how people read. And so that is why those older things are just a lot less accessible. Again, if someone's well trained in it, God bless you, and you can still get trained in those. So I wouldn't call them totally outdated, but boy, I would just call it the long road. So, Alina, what else we got?
Okay, so we have another question that's from Samin, and it says, as a soon-to-be LMFT, working mainly with couples, what are the top 3 training certificates that are important to have in your opinion, and whether it is worth to be certified in them or just learning them?
Working mainly with couples. Well, in some ways that's kind of easy. Obviously, I think my class does a great job with that. I think it's the simplest way. But there are only 2 evidence-based treatments for working with couples. One is EFT, the other one is integrated behavioral couples therapy. Those are the 2 EBTs. So if that's what you want to specialize in, these are the things that you would look at. So great question. What else?
Okay, another one. Some people are asking if they can actually access this webinar in the future, like if it will be uploaded again onto your YouTube, so that the way they can.
I'm hoping all the recording. I think we're recording on 3 devices. I'm hoping it all recorded, because I tried to record something a couple of weeks ago and it didn't get recorded. So I'm hoping for the best today. So that's the plan.
Okay, and so one of the attendees attended late, and so they were wondering if you could list the broad theories so they could have a general feel, but I'm not sure if you had already touched base on those earlier. So
yeah, I'll have you just rewatch the replay, because I don't actually get into a lot of theoretical names except for in some of these questions. Because the point, my point is to kind of go through. Well, actually, I went through some of the history in I guess the first part, so you can go back and rewatch the first part, and I marched through it there.
Okay. So the next question is, one of the attendees is stating that they are wondering if the classes are available at any time or only on the fixed hours, and that you can't miss them.
Oh no, you can miss everything. You can miss every live segment. Every course is offered at a couple different times, mostly on the weekends, because that's when most people like to have them. But you don't have to be anywhere at any specific time. You can just join when you want to. And so, what I noticed is a lot of people either had favorite types of classes they wanted to attend. Some people try to attend everything every single time. You're welcome to do that. You're welcome to attend 0 of the courses live and do everything recorded. You're going to get it all. And like I said, there are many people, because their anxiety gets so high when it's live sometimes, that they actually learn better watching the recording because they're less anxious. And as we do a lot of brain stuff in this course, just learning how to take in information. So yeah, so you can take it, like I said, at any time. You cannot attend anything live, or you could attend 2 of everything live. You can do it either way, because it's whatever works for your schedule, your life, and your learning style, quite frankly. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, so another question is, what are your thoughts on the collaborative language systems approach?
Well, I've edited a book with Harleen. I have another one coming out. It's an edited book with folks from around the world using collaborative dialogic practices, is what we call it nowadays. And we really talked about using it not just in therapy, but to run a school, not like school-based counseling or school-based therapy. It was like to administer classrooms and teachers' learning experiences. We have people using it in impoverished communities around the world to just create safer, better communities. We had people using it in business to organize construction companies. So when they came up with construction plans, they involved the community. So there is such amazing work being done around the globe. And I think at a time when the world is so divided, these ideas are going to be so, so important moving forward. That's also why I don't know when I'm going to teach this course again, because I know as we launch that work and that book, There's going to be just a lot of working around our society is so divided. We see, half of America sees the other half as evil, and both halves are pointing at each other as evil. And this is not good for society. And we're not the only culture in the world that is this divided. There's a lot of divisiveness in the world. When we've got problems that are global, like climate change and a pandemic, we're still having all this like sibling infighting. It's not healthy for anyone. It has created so much stress in our lives, in our families, in our communities, in our schools. It's heartbreaking. So I think this work is so important, collaborative, connecting, and I do describe it in my courses, get the movie, get the interpretation, but it's about connecting and bringing forth the humanity in that other person. And I so believe this is, definitely in my course. How do we connect with another human being and pull forth their humanity? That has to be a top skill for every mental health professional. I would love to teach every school professional that. Anyone who's working in community settings, and just any human being in a family, we need to heal these divides we've created, because we've dehumanized others, and that's why we can treat them so horrifically. And I feel like mental health professionals, we are going to be the leaders in helping healing our families, our communities, our societies, to rehumanize everyone, to deal with the really big issues we have around us, like climate change, natural disasters, and the pandemic. We have division around racism and just safety for all members in any society, and just the rights of people around the world. And in every culture is, I guess nation is dealing with this in different ways. We got a lot to deal with. We got to work together to solve these issues. And so I do believe deeply that collaborative work is applicable, not just in the therapy room, but in a business boardroom, in our community centers. Very, very excited and passionate about that.
Wonderful.
Okay, that question, Elena, I can't remember what it was either.
Yeah, I was asking on your thoughts on collaborative language systems, and so
yeah.
And so, it kind of segues into, there were some people asking questions about what the name of that book that you were mentioning is called.
Oh, the book that Harlene and I are putting forth?
Yes.
It is called Collaborative Dialogic Practices. There's a verb we've changed about 4 times, something like building. It's not building, it's not facilitating. We just changed the verb, but there's a verb, relationships and conversations across contexts and cultures. And I'm so sorry, we just changed the verb in the subtitle. And because if you take my course, you'll learn how perceiving type on the Myers-Briggs. I can't remember the verb, but it's like facilitating relationships and conversations across cultures and contexts is the name of the book. But the main title is Collaborative Dialogic Practice. And it is true, I struggle often to remember the titles of my books and have to often look them up. And that's just how my brain works. Since you take the course, I will have a very unique take on the cognitive functions using Myers-Briggs. And when you take that lecture, you can think of this moment. You're like, oh, that's why she doesn't know her own, book title, because she's an intuitive type and perceiving type. And I remember the process of coming up with the title, but oh yeah, what was that magical word? It is not coming up to me right now. Love it. Other questions?
Someone's asking if they can't register today for the course, when will they be able to do it, to do the course itself?
This is the only time I have it scheduled to be taught. I don't know when it'll be taught again. I mean, definitely by next fall might be the next time. There's a possibility of spring, but for sure, I would say next fall, 2022. So if you're wanting to get into the course, I recommend, if you're thinking of doing it in the next 6 months, this is the only time in the next 6 months for absolute darn sure that I'm teaching this course. So that's why it's really, you can do it in 12 weeks or 2 years. It's all there. You have access to it all. So definitely, so that's when it's being offered for sure, is right now. Because I got lots of other things kind of coming up, and those have to get put into place before I will teach this again, because it's a huge class for me to teach as well. What else? Sorry, Elena.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, right below the question is someone's asking if there's an exam at the end of the course.
Is there an exam? There is, you get 45 CEs for it. And so there is a very, very short thing to, but mostly I think we're going to be able to track much better this year, whether or not you went to all the live segments. So we'll add up all the hours and issue the CE that way. So if you went to the live segments, there may be less of an exam, but there's just a little bit. It's just, did you actually, watch the course, engage in the course? Did you learn what you needed to learn? Did you do your 45, hours through the course type of thing? But it's not like a scary exam of any kind. It's, did you actually watch the video, 12 weeks ago or whatever it was? I expect you to kind of have remembered this. So it's nothing scary, nothing like a licensing exam. I promise. It's, were you awake and conscious while taking in this information? Great question. Alina?
Okay, wonderful. There's another question that's asking, where would you suggest that we can access the most updated info on evidence-based practices?
So there's so many streams of research here. So you can go to the SAMHSA, that's the National Institute in the United States. I know we've got some folks around the world here. So it's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, I believe is what SAMHSA is. They have toolkits for all the EBTs that are recognized that they've funded the research on. Jay LeBeau has a really great book on research for the psychotherapists. He just came out with a second edition. So that's another great summary of research findings. It's funny, I wrote this article for Scientific America, and it was for their psychiatrists. And I summarized like all of the research for psychiatrists to use basically couple family therapy as their intervention, like they would use a medication. Like literally the template was for medications, and family therapy, couple therapy was the medication treatment option. And that was a great article. I just don't know how to give access to that. You have to go through their database, I think, to get that. I have no idea how much that one costs, but we need more stuff like that. Like I said, here's the researchers, here's the theories, here are the people in the field. Like Scientific America came up with this database for psychiatrists, because there's a lot more money with medications, right? To really summarize all that. I wrote the article for them, and we need a mechanism like that to deliver all of this. We do not have great ways of doing this. We really don't. And I'm still doing psych info. And even for me, that is a lot of work to gather all this information. I always find tons of amazing things there, but there's no one systematically doing that. In family therapy, the American Association for Family Therapy does a pretty good job of doing that. Professional organizations in general, I think ACA does a decent job, APA. The national organizations do a pretty good job of trying to keep practitioners up to date. That's another place. It's just not deep enough, I guess, but at least it gives you a clue as to what's going on. One of the habits I have is I do belong to MFT. I get the Journal of Family Therapy. You click a button, they'll mail it to your house. And if you're paying full fee, not for student, rates, but I read those abstracts every time a journal comes out. And having a few of those journals, I have them come to my house. They're taking up all my wall space and bookshelves, but that's really a good way to keep up with it too. So it is not easy. And I'm saying we need a mechanism that makes it much easier for people, because practicing clinicians are now 30 hours a week in a room, helping a client, high crisis, mountains of paperwork. They can't be sorting through this. And we need to find some mechanism to do that in the field.
Okay. Someone is wondering that the CEs, are you able to get CEs even as a psychologist, LPCC, CSW?
So I have the NBCC and the CAMP. So NBCC, I believe, works for most licenses in the United States, I think even abroad in some places. I do not have the psych recognition for this program for psychologists. I do not have. It is the MFT, social workers, and counselors should have no issue. And even in Europe, I think some folks recognize that NBCC, it was no mean feat to get that. recognition, and your state, if you're a psychologist, it's possible that your state board may allow the MBCC because it is well recognized. They're very tight on their rules. But those are the two certifications that I have.
Okay, wonderful. So another question came in about what are some potential job outcomes for people who connect more with collaborative dialogic practices?
Job outcomes? Well, I think what you'll find is that when you get really good, I call it connecting well. So here, just so you know, my course, what I do is I take all of what I've learned. I'm drawing from, obviously, Carl Rogers taught me how to connect and satir. And I use primarily, I was training collaborative. I also have all the mindfulness stuff, being present, and the brain research on how to connect well. And I pull all of that together, and I'm going to teach you how to get a movie and do the interpretation. So when you're in the room, you're like, what's the movie? What's the interpretation? And make it really, really simple to use. So in terms of the job, so when you can connect well, which is my second module in this course, the first one is we work on you and who you are as a human being in this world, 360, all areas of your life. And I think that is a foundation that we skip everywhere. The next piece that I work on is connecting well. And honest to God, if you can do this, this is 80% of what your outcomes are going to be attributed to. I swear to God, when you look at all that common factors research and those clinicians, that 15 to 20% who are better than everyone else, this is what they do. And I swear to God, I do. You're going to learn that in this course. This is the magic. I mean, this is at the end of the day. In some ways, it's like I do all theories. In some ways, it's this connecting piece. I learned it through collaborative. I learned it through mindfulness. I think really deepens your presence in that work. So what your job outcomes are is when you can connect like that. When people pick up the phone and talk to me, it is amazing. Like in less than 5 minutes, I cannot tell you how many times I have talked to someone for less than 5 minutes. And sometimes I'm just referring them out because often I don't have space in my practice to take anyone. And they're like, in talking to you for 5 minutes, I feel more understood and more connected than I ever did to my last therapist who I worked with for 2 years. And that is what is different. And when you talk about job outcomes and clinical outcomes, when you connect like this, in the first session, I do so much work because people, trust me, we are connected. We connect on that phone. We have a connection. We meet in that first session, and it takes minutes to create that. And certainly by the end of the first session, your clients are going to feel understood, often in a way that very few people in their life have ever felt understood. And so, and that is what they're finding, that 15 to 20% of clinicians who are better than everyone else. I can tell you this is what they're doing. It's not their interventions. It is this. You create this human connection, but you have to have done your work, not to be perfect, but to accept your imperfection. And when you can accept the humanity of who you are, you can accept the humanity of the person in front of you. And when the person in front of you is like, oh, you can see me and all of my flaws and my imperfections and all my problems, and you still see my humanity, that is it. That is what we need to teach. It is a hard skill to teach. That is the heart. That is why the first 2 modules of this course are just trying to get you to a place where you accept your own humanity. The person sitting across from you can feel you accepting their humanity as you see all of those flaws. I am telling you, that is how change happens in a nutshell. It really is. And we get really over-focused on all these theories and how did change start and where did it begin and what do I do and what's step 5 of this and step 6 of this and what's the right intervention and what do I get trained in, and we get lost in that and we miss the person sitting in front of us. We miss that chance to connect. So again, Alina, I can hardly remember. I believe we were talking about collaborative therapy and connecting.
Yeah, potential job outcomes.
Job outcomes. So job outcomes. So when you can do that, you are, first of all, your work is going to become much easier because your clients are going to change. So if you want to, but if you want to stay in an agency, it certainly positions you to, since you play well with others, to move up in ranks, to become a supervisor, and to really shape an organization, because you can't just do this with clients, folks. You have to do it with all your colleagues too. Forgot to mention that, all your family members. So, but as you do that, you're because you become more effective, you will rise within an organization. I will tell you, it positions you very well to have a private practice, where in a private practice, you pick up that phone and in less than 5 minutes, a person feels connected to you. They show up and they stay. It was so funny. I was talking to someone recently. They're like, and half of all, therapy sessions, people only, number one is the average number of sessions, because after one session, half the time people never come back for their second session. I like literally forgot that people drop out of therapy. I mean, I literally have forgotten that over the years, because it knock on wood, it doesn't happen to me, because I know how to connect. Like literally, I forgot that there are people who drop out. It's a foreign concept. It's just a foreign concept to me. It's honest to God, the truth. And I just share that because, and I really believe it comes down to doing my own work, self as a therapist, and connecting well, which, I did through Learning Collaborative. I believe my mindfulness, being, relationally attuned, doing all of that work, working on myself. You don't have to do mindfulness, or I don't even teach a whole lot of mindfulness in this course. I actually teach mindfulness in my licensing course. I don't, that's my way of getting in tune with myself. It was my method. There are lots of methods to get there, but the quality of who you are and how you show up, and your ability to connect with the humanity, I can't describe it. It's like you bring forth their humanity. You can tell their eyes like fill with a light and presence in them where you're like, they haven't allowed themselves to experience just fully being human before either. And listen to me, I'm talking like Carl Rogers, but I was trained by Harlan Anderson. And that's what I'm saying. It comes full circle. There is this thing that we are doing that is, I think, sacred work. It's very powerful. And when you can do that, yes, your job prospects go up. And that's why people are saying it's worth all the money you put into this program, because first of all, I think your ability to improve your own life, I actually go over your financial well-being. I swear to God, that's a bonus session. I know no one will let me give you CEs, but I have a session and I give you spreadsheets and everything to, include that. But yes, your ability, it is priceless when you're able to do this, because you really can take your career to whole new levels. And I really think that is an important part in terms of just when you can do this work well, it transforms how far you're going to go. And I do have a module that talks about, now that you can do this work well, let's talk about how you can really increase your income in this field, because we don't talk enough about that either. So awesome. Alina, thank you. Anything else there?
Yeah. Just one of the attendees is asking if they can get some technical support after the webinar to help them apply for the 12-month CEU credit option. Then others asking about what are the days and times of the live sessions, as well as if we can possibly upload a link to the course registration.
Oh, absolutely. Andres is on here. If you're still here, Andres, go ahead and put the link to the course registration. I'm so sorry. I meant to have that in there. Wow. I can't believe we forgot that. So yeah, Andres, if you could drop that in, or I can do that probably. But yeah, go ahead and just the link to register for the course. Oh my God, that is unfortunate that I did not get that up there, but.
Let me help you with that. No worries.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so we will upload that. And if you want the special technical support, sure. Andres, while you're at it, put a link to the course in there, and then put a link to my Zoom personal room, my standard room. And at the end of this, I will, God, we did go long here. I will open up a room, and if you want me to show you how to do that, I will. We can share a screen and make it happen. Cool.
Perfect. There's one more question. And it's about the Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy book, if it is a good study material for the licensing exam.
Absolutely. All of my textbooks were originally developed way back in prehistoric times when, you know, dinosaurs roamed the planet, actually back in the 20th century. I was a graduate assistant for someone who was tasked back in the day before there was a national MFT or counseling exam. So we all had state exams. I took the state LPC exam in Texas. But my supervisor was working on the state Texas MFT exam. And so I actually created a study guide, the official study guide for the Texas MFT exam back in the day. And those evolved into my lecture notes, and those evolved into all my textbooks. And so both the counseling books and all my MFT books actually started as licensed prep materials. And you'll notice what's different about my textbooks and others is that they're all done by vocabulary word, because you need to know those vocabulary words both on the counseling and MFT exams to pass those sections, you know, anything theory related. So definitely, I've had people email me for decades now. That's how old I am, how old my books are. I'm saying, thank you. I couldn't have passed without your textbook and those YouTube lectures I have on all the theories. So awesome, awesome. Okay, so did we get the link for the class up too? I don't see that one. I got the link that just went up is a Zoom link for after, and then Andres also just posted. Whoopsie, you know what, Andres? Can you post that to all the Andres, if you could post it, you got to change your settings and post it to all the attendees. You should get it also in the chat section, I think.
Oh, sure. Let me check that.
It needs to go to everyone. Yep. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So there it is. There is a Therapy That Works Institute.com Gehart methods where you register for the class. There is a, what do you call it again? Yeah, it's also on the same last slide. If you can type well, you don't make typos. And then if you could repost, we're going to post a link for the Zoom session. If you have specific questions you just want to ask to me, that doesn't get, broadcasted this whole webinar. Definitely, you can hop on that Zoom link and I will hang out for a little bit longer. Let's see if we got that going up. Awesome. And here's a Zoom link. Okay, Andres. So that US O2 web Zoom is private Zoom link. I'll maybe hop on that in 4 minutes at noon. We'll wrap this session up. And the other link is for the course. Don't forget your coupon code, put it in, webinar 250. So awesome. Okay. Any other last questions? Lena, did you check over on YouTube? Are we good over there?
Oh, yes. So if someone was just wanting to clarify, if you can also mention the days and times that the live sessions are held for the course.
Yes. Yes. So the live sessions, they vary. They're going to be held. They're mostly on Saturdays and Sundays. There are a few Thursday, Friday options as well. There is always a morning time and evening time that are at least 8 hours apart. So no matter where you are on the globe, there is a time that will work for you. We had this issue. I didn't anticipate such an international audience last year. So there are morning and evening, and most of them are on weekends. There are some Thursday ones as well, because for some people I know that is a Thursday evenings. We have a couple of those. But there's a variety of times. Something will work for everyone. Like I said, no matter where you are on the globe, there should be a semi-decent time for you to join the course and to join those live sessions. And I think we have well over 40 hours scheduled. And that's double of everything's offered at least twice. So you will not run out of options. And also just depending, once I figure out where everyone is on the globe, we might be adding more sessions to even to what we have. So if you want to make a session, there should be lots of opportunities to do the live segments. If that's how you like to learn.
I just dropped Diane I apologize. I just dropped on the chat. If you want to take a look at the calendar, so people can take a look and see when the live sessions are gonna be held.
Okay. Where can you find the textbooks? They're all at cengage.com. Yeah. Okay. You can buy them there. You can buy them Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, any place that sells books. You can get the textbooks there. Absolutely. And if you're on my mailing list, I'll let you know when Harleen and my book, it's taking forever to get out. But it is a beautiful piece of work. And I think just especially during climate change, global pandemic, social justice movements all over the globe, it's a beautiful piece. There are a lot of beautiful pieces that just bring you hope for humanity. Bring hope for humanity. That is what they're about. So awesome. Okay. How long is the class? Oh yeah, so if you're worried, the course goes it's October through December with the live components. It goes, so you can jump in and out, as many of those as you want to. If you're studying for licensure, I had lots of people studying for licensure who were in this course, and it really helped them to kind of put some of those pieces together for them. And again, if you're totally stressed out, it's only a couple hours a week typically to get through it all. So it's certainly something you could do while studying for licensure. And it helps layer all of that learning. And I think that framework is a useful framework. I call it the 4-level assessment, but it allows you to understand how all the theories kind of fit together and to see those commonalities. So that's what I like about that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do some cross-pollination between my licensure course and my, Therapy That Works course to see how we can help layer that learning. Yeah, I'm seeing questions here. Yeah, it's absolutely, if you're starting grad school, we had people who had not first year grad students, and they loved it. It just pulled everything together. It's a lot simpler. In some ways, I'm going to do this 45-hour course, what an entire master's graduate program does in terms of teaching you how to work. It pulls it all together. And I think it's a great template to come in with. It's also a great template if you're experienced, because suddenly you can see how everything you've ever learned fits together. And there's something beautiful and magical. I mean, that's really how I came to this. As I was experienced, I began to see how all those pieces kind of came together. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I hope we answered everyone's questions. If you have very specific questions just about the course, how to register, how to make the finances work, I am going to now jump into a more private, small Zoom session, and I will answer all those specific questions about the course there. So thank you, everyone. I hope this was inspiring. I hope this resonated with you. And I hope to make sense of I think so many people feel overwhelmed, burdened, and stressed out. I really hope it resonated with you. It's like, this is why I feel overwhelmed, burdened, and stressed out. It makes sense now. So, and I hope it gives some relief and some insight and some vision into what is possible, because I do think our field is really in need of big change. And we have to overhaul. We are a medical professional. We are going to be moving in that direction. And so I think taking a cue from them and really using much more practical, streamlined methods, frameworks to do our work is what's going to enable us to thrive, both personally in terms of not being so stressed by our work, and professionally in having better outcomes. So I hope you're inspired. I'm inspired. Take care. And yes, I will see some of you in just a few minutes in the Zoom link. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Alina and Andres, for all your background assistance. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope to see or talk with you soon. Bye-bye.